Welcome to Just Google It, Information Literacy, Metaliteracy, and Prior Knowledge. Glad you all can make it. Jennifer Ferguson from Simmons College will be leading this discussion, and there'll be Q&A afterwards. So, Jennifer, I turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Hi. First, I just want to thank everyone for coming to my session. When I saw that Trudy was presenting at the same time as me, I didn't think anyone would come. It was a really good turnout, so thank you. So today, it's called Just Google It, Information Literacy, Metaliteracy, and Prior Knowledge. And what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to start out talking about a little bit of the theory that underlies a deceptively simple lesson plan for a one-shot instruction session. Because we've heard a lot this morning, and I know at the breakout I went to this morning about how one-shots are really not ideal for information literacy, particularly meta-literacy instruction, because how can we get at some of these concepts in one class? And it is a real big challenge. But I think at Simmons, we've designed a first-year module for information literacy instruction that allows us to get at some of these higher order concepts with a relatively simple structure. So that's why it's information literacy, meta-literacy, and prior knowledge. So my first question for everyone is, what do students know about information? What do they bring in with that, right? They all know about how to find funny cat videos on YouTube, that's for sure. Well, the answer is actually a lot. They actually bring a lot of knowledge in with them. It's just figuring out how to harness that knowledge and make it in service of information literacy. That's the key. So they actually know a lot. They know how to serve, they know how to find information, and they know how to satisfy information needs that they have to that point through high school. And in this case, I'm really talking about traditional first-year students coming out of high school, coming into college, into a four-year college, or perhaps a two-year community college program, but mostly about those traditional students. And they know how to satisfy a particular information need. So they can go from funny cat videos to how to find out more about cats as a species on Wikipedia. This we know that they know. But they don't know everything, and some of what they know is wrong. So a lot of them think, why do I need the library when everything is free on Google? Well, we all know that's not true, but they don't know that's not true, and how do we convince them? So why should we care what the students know? Well, there's a really large body of research out there in the field of education, and it's about prior knowledge. And what we know is there's widespread agreement, ever since even the 70s, that students must connect new knowledge to prior knowledge in order to learn. So there's a really large body of research on this topic. And what does that mean for us? It means library instruction needs to find a place in the student's mental framework, because they already have a mental framework. And because of the nature of information that we're living with now, their framework consists of a lot of things that we might not even be that familiar with. So their information framework includes crowdsourcing, right? Not just Wikipedia crowdsourcing, but crowdsourcing answers. So they'll go into ask.com, or they'll crowdsource an answer for themselves. Social media. Their information framework includes social media. Their information framework includes a lot of the things that we may not even use on a day-to-day basis, but that we should be really familiar with if they're bringing that in with them. So how do we know what it is that they know? Well, I want to really thank Project Information Literacy. Is everybody familiar with that? Right? Okay, so Project Information Literacy, PIL, they have done a lot of research on students, a lot of hard quantitative and qualitative research on what students know. And they recently released something they called the Freshman Study. And what that does, if you look at the data in the freshman study, it actually confirms things that we kind of know as librarians, that if you've been working in information literacy for long enough, you kind of get the feeling that this is what they're doing, but we didn't know this for sure, and this is hard data on what they're doing. What we do know is that they're overwhelmed by library materials. As familiar as they are with using all the tools they're comfortable with on the web, with the social media, with all of that, they're really uncomfortable with the plethora of information we provide them in the library. It's just overwhelming. And as you know, a fairly experienced librarian, I've also heard so many times at the reference desk, I don't know where to start. I just don't know where to start. And we keep trying to make our products easier to start. Oh, now it's the discovery system. Just start right there. But for them, it's still just the idea of the library website, all of that. Interestingly enough, there's this gap. So what we need to do is find the gaps in the student's information framework. We need to fill the gaps that they have in their knowledge and correct the misperceptions that they have about information. And this is a lesson I'm going to talk about today about how we fill those gaps. So let's fill the gaps, right? What are the gaps that they have, right? So we know, again, thanks to Project Information Literacy, we know a lot about the gaps. We know that they really don't understand format, right? They don't understand how information format affects content. They don't really know about authoritative information, different kinds of information sources, different types and how you use that and how you incorporate it. They don't know about research as a process of inquiry. They don't know it as an iterative process. How many times have we also heard from students, I need to find an article that says this. We know there's no one perfect article out there that says what they want it to say. But they don't understand that there's this whole conversation that's going on in scholarly information, and they have to start at the beginning. And they don't really get that. So there's a lot of things that they don't get about information, and there's a lot of gaps that we can fill as long as we know the place in their framework to put this information. So what do the gaps sound like? Really, they suspiciously sound like the threshold concept. It's really interesting to me how this is really closely mapping my own experience at, anecdotal personal experience as an instructor, but the threshold concepts really do map to a lot of the gaps that they have in their knowledge. Scholarship is a conversation. They really don't understand the scholarly conversation. Research is inquiry. It's a process. It's not an endpoint. It's a process. And format as process. So in other words, they really don't get that what kind of information, what type of information that you're looking for, the process of finding it and evaluating it depends on what you're looking for. So these are all gaps that we can fill. So how do we do that? See, I put the little glasses on the librarian.
I like that.
Yeah.
I don't know who made it, but I liked it.
I made that.
Oh, you did?
Yes. So what do we need to do, right? We need to connect the world that we know they know, or at least they have some knowledge of, with our world. So we need to plug these two together to fill those gaps. And how do we do that? Well, the method I'm going to talk about today is using deep analogies. And there's a lot of research out there on everything I'm talking about. Prior knowledge, using deep analogy to make connections. Lots of this kind of information that I'm going to talk about today. There's a lot of scholarly information. There's a lot of articles about it. I'm not listing them all in my presentation, but I have handouts for anyone who's interested in the bibliography. Because this is sort of all of the underlying theory that we use to create this module. So we're using analogies. And what does that mean? It means we're making explicit connections through every step of this lesson to circle back into what they already know and what we kind of know they know. So we're going to make all those connections, we're going to put the two together. So how do we do that? Well, the method, okay, so I'm talking about three different things here now. Harnessing prior knowledge, using deep analogy, and we're using it in a scaffolded lesson. So we're going to scaffold them up at each step of this lesson. And again, this isn't a one-shot lesson. So what a scaffolding does is breaking up the learning into chunks and then providing a tool, right, or a structure with each chunk. So once you kind of break that into a chunk and connect that back to what they already know, you're going to get a little bit more effective learning. So this is my favorite. Just a picture of an index card. This is why I say this is a very deceptively simple lesson that gets at very high order concepts. So chunk one, this is how we broke it up. Background and context. And what we do with this chunk is we hand them out at the very beginning of our class we introduce ourselves, hi, we're the librarians, this is what we're going to do today, and we hand them an index card. And we ask them, write on this index card what you want to work on today. Could be a topic you already have for paper. Hopefully, we're at that cycle in their syllabus where they have an assignment, so they have a topic to work on. Sometimes it's not ideal, it doesn't work out that way. So we say something you're interested in working on, something from a class discussion that you're interested in discovering more about or think you might like to work on, something from your reading. But just write something down here. And the reason that we do it on an index card is because of all of the research that's out there about that hand-brain connection. There's so much research out there now on how students writing things down physically connects that helps them remember it much better than typing it on a laptop or on a mobile device or anything else. So if you want them to really remember it, we start them out with an index card. It's a very basic idea. But that hand-to-brain connection, I think, is really important for them at this point. Okay, so write down your topic. First thing, social media. After they've all had a chance to write something on the index card, I actually start by asking them, you tell me, how would you go about researching this? Where would you start? How would you do it? Where would you look first? What would you do? So if you had this assignment last spring when you were in high school, how would you do this assignment? At first they're kind of reluctant because they know, they've been told, a lot of them, especially the students we get at Simmons who probably have had some experience in a high school library, that the way they're doing it might not be the best way, but that's how they're comfortable. So they don't want to confess, usually, that I'll Google it and I'll go to Wikipedia. Then I confess that. If I can't get the students to tell me that, I'll confess it. I say, you know what I would do? I would Google it. And guess what I would find? Wikipedia, right? So the first part of this lesson, I'm having them kind of talk to each other about what it is, how they would find information, where they'd go, and that there's no wrong answer here. There's just a way to satisfy an information need. And we're trying to help them understand that they can satisfy that need in a better way by using certain kinds of library products. So after they confess that they're going to do that, we talk about what Wikipedia is, right? The wiki part, the shared, crowdsourced information, but also the pedia part, because that's the part they don't get. It's an encyclopedia, they don't know what that means. It's not part of their world anymore. Wikipedia is the pedia they know. So we make these connections. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about deep analogies. Every chunk of this lesson is going back and making connections back to what they know and what they're doing. So how would they do it? They'd go to Wikipedia. So I explain to them a little bit about it, and usually their faculty member is there and says, and yes, you can't cite Wikipedia, which all faculty members will say. And so I say, well, where can you go to get that kind of information? What kind of information are you looking for? Well, that's when we talk about background and context, what the type of information is. And the difference, I think, in this lesson is, too, is we're starting, rather than at information source, we're starting at information type. What is it that they're looking for? Where does that fit in the information ecosystem? What they use that kind of information for. So after we have the Wikipedia talk, when they discuss Wikipedia, I say, what is it that you find there that you find so helpful? And they talk about definitions, right? Statistics, overview. Oh, I get a quick sense of what that topic's all about. Okay, that's background and context. That's information that you use for a specific purpose. And in the course of your assignment, you're going to want to do that too. I have them go out then to Credo Reference, which is the product we use, but you could use any reference product that you're using. And I say to them, all right, go into Credo, and I do a very brief, there's very little point and click in this lesson. I do very brief demonstrations of these. Then I have them do it. And I tell them, okay, read the entry in Credo on your topic and write some more things you learned from that entry on your index card. Because what we're doing here is we're building up to a keyword search. And we're building up to how you construct knowledge, which is a really big concept for them. So I have them write a little bit more on their card. Could be synonyms, other words for things. specific areas of this topic you really want to drill into. It helps them think about their topic and clarify exactly what it is that they're looking for. And I make them write a little bit more about their topic on the card. Okay, step 2. We've gone through the background and context piece of this. Okay, how do you get that? How do you get certain kinds of knowledge? Where do you go next? This is when we talk about topic overviews. Where do you find that? How many times, I mentioned this before, how many times do students say, I'm looking for that perfect article, when what it really is that they want is a book? Because that's where they're going to find that kind of information. So where do we go next? We're building up from one level to the next. So we go into the library catalog. We talk about it, explain it. They add a little bit to their search, so add some terms that you learned from Credo, from the entry you looked at, add some extra terms, search in the library catalog for a little bit more. We explain what they're going to find here. You can get summaries, contents, etc. We also talk about the impact that format has on the way that knowledge is presented. So what happens if you go to the catalog and get a whole book? What happens if you click through Google Books? We link to Google Books. So what happens if you click through to Google Books? What happens is you might get an excerpt, a summary, and we talk about the impact of the presentation and format of that information on their knowledge about that topic. Because if they're only looking at a piece of it in Google Books, it's certainly not going to be the same experience as reading the entire book that they might get from the library. How much of the piece are you reading? What parts were left out? How do you even know that? So it might say in Google Books, and we'll usually click through, it'll say, pages 115 to 135 are left out for copyright reasons. This gets into a discussion about copyright, about how information is presented on the web, about why things are not always 100% free on Google. So again, we're always circling back to that first idea, which is, yes, there's a place in the library system, and yes, what you're looking at really makes a big impact on what you're learning about a topic. So we go from here, we have them add a little bit more information to their index card, maybe refine their idea from some of the book titles or contents or summaries they're looking at, add a little bit more to their index card. So we're thinking about this the whole time. The third chunk of this lesson is the scholarly conversation. Now we're going to talk about how that whole conversation fits together. From the background information we saw that underlies it, gives you basic facts, definitions, statistics, etc. Through topic overviews and books. But that book we saw on Wikipedia was dated 2008, right? In our world, that's really old for a book on Wikipedia. Where do you go for really new information, really new research? We talk about this gives us the place to demonstrate, again, very briefly, to demonstrate how you use Academic Search Complete, to construct a keyword search out of those index card terms that they were working with. Now we're going to show you how to put those terms together into a keyword search, and we're going to find an academic journal article. And it gives us a chance to, talk about, again, it's a process. The whole process of library research is taking information that you're finding, adding it to the information you already know or have, and reconstructing your search from there. So we're having them continually circle back and make analogies about what we found before, what kind of information was there, and what it would do for the argument, until we've worked up to the point where they can find a scholarly journal article. And I talked to them about a scholarly journal article. And of course, we've gotten into authority before. Wikipedia also gives you a great opportunity to talk about authority. Who's authoring it? Why are they writing it? What's the purpose of it? How do you tell who wrote a particular entry? How do we determine quality? It gives you all kinds of ideas. So the whole idea is to keep connecting this back to what they already know. Now we've worked into a scholarly journal article. Now, okay, that's authority. Now we're looking at, faculty members, scholars, university professors writing these articles. But what does it mean? Here's something that I find really frustrating sometimes working with faculty, which is they'll say, your assignment, you have 5 scholarly journal articles or 10 scholarly journal articles. That's what they say they have to have. The students, how can they possibly read and make any sense of this? unless they know how to get up to those, unless they can scaffold that information. So, oh, well, how do you go? And I ask them, so what do you do? Like, so now you've gotten this scholarly journal article. You need like 3 for your assignment. You've gotten this article. What does it mean? How do you know what it means? Well, right here, there's some terms in the title you might not understand, like groupthink. So how do you read that unless you know what that term means, since it's an important part of this argument? What do? Look it up, right? Look it up. I had one student who confessed, and I thought this was the greatest thing, that when she's searching for articles, she has 2 windows open and she keeps Wikipedia open in one window, and she looks up terms she doesn't understand. I said, that is one of the greatest things I've ever heard. Yes, that's exactly what you need to do. You need to look this stuff up and learn more about it. And it's okay if you use Wikipedia to look that up and find out what groupthink means. That's absolutely fine, as long as you look it up and figure out what it means. I mean, we talk about the pitfalls of all of this information during the whole time, but it gives us many, many opportunities to connect what they know to things that we want them to know. So why do you do it this way? Why do you start with background? Why is Wikipedia so useful? And we keep connecting all of these things back through the whole lesson. So what does it mean? And again, during this whole lesson, our library classroom is actually set up really well for roaming. So most of this is not point and click, brief demonstrations. During the time they're working on any of these particular projects themselves, like if they're searching in a particular database, we roam during that whole time. The really good thing about that is if you're standing right next to a student, or you're just walking around, they can call you over. They'll call you over. They usually have the greatest things to share with the rest of the class. But they're not comfortable just saying, oh, I discovered this, so they share it with me, and then I share it with the class. Oh, your classmate just had a really good idea. Or, oh, your classmate just asked me a question. I probably should have made that clear at the beginning of this lesson, so I'm really glad you did. Whenever I do that, I always compliment them for asking the question and ask them if it's okay to share it with the class before I actually do share it. So that's a really good idea. Can I share this? And they're always happy to share it with their classmates, and it does generate a conversation. So we've gone through this part. We've had them do the index card. We've shown them how the scholarly conversation works. The next part of this lesson is a worksheet, an evaluation worksheet. And this is searching and reflecting time. Again, it's that idea of conversation, of reflecting back and transferring knowledge. And again, there's a whole body of research on how students can transfer knowledge from one place to the next. And a lot of it has to do with reflecting on their own practice, thinking about what they're doing, thinking about how they're doing it, and what works for them and what doesn't work. So the first part of the worksheet is searching and reflecting on Academic Search Complete. You could do it on any library product. This is just the one we happen to use in the fall, mainly because the first year writing faculty is most comfortable with it. So this is the one we did in the fall. And they're thinking about it, and again, we've discussed during this entire lesson what library materials are, a subset of the information universe. It's just a piece of it that we've gathered together for them for lots of different reasons. We talk about that. We have them search one particular small subset of that subset, talk about the information that they're finding. We have them find it, one journal article, and then explain why they would use that particular article in an assignment. What about it? Did it confirm your argument? Did it have some key statistics you were looking for? What about that was important for you? And here's the most important part of this lesson. Second half of the worksheet, searching and reflecting Google. Okay? So what we do is we have them, okay, take the keyword search. We've taught you how to gather all this information together into a topic. Take your topic, create a keyword search out of it, search library products, get information, revise your search with new information that you're finding. Now take that keyword search that you did and do the exact same search in Google. This is actually the most important part of this whole lesson. And it's because this is where we make that loop. That big circle back from the very beginning We're looping it back. Everything is part of the information universe. The formats you're finding, everything that we're doing, you can apply the same evaluative skills from a library product to something that you find on Google. So after we have them search and reflect, and I do this before I teach them how to use Google a little bit more in a more sophisticated manner, because I want to see what they found, and I want to see what they think about what they found. So they reflect back on it. Why did you search, or what did you find when you searched Google using the same search? Why would, what would you start, one way or the other? If you were doing this project, what would you choose first, and why? Why would you do that? So why would you choose? What did you find, and why would you choose to search one or the other? And they really do reflect on it, and at the end of that, we have a very large class discussion. And usually if students are asleep, information literacy instruction, sometimes they're as soon as you start talking about Google, Wikipedia, reflecting it back, they're awake through the whole thing, and they're really engaged with this because it's something that makes sense to them, and it's something they're actually interested in knowing more about. The first thing is they don't want to confess they don't know that much about it. But then they figure out they really don't. So after they've completed this worksheet, we go back and we have the discussion about domains and what they mean. I mean, simple things that they really, most of them still do not understand. How that domain impacts the information they're going to find. Why they never go past the first page of Google results, right? I asked them, do you? And they're like, no, never. So why don't you? Well, the number of results is overwhelming. Is that why you choose Wikipedia? Absolutely. It always comes up at the top, and why does that happen? So we have that discussion about page ranking, about Google's relevancy ranking, about Google Ads, about all of the things that they're finding, about the different formats of materials. So when they're searching the library catalog, they're now going to find streaming media files, ebooks, and all kinds of material in there. So how does that material, what are you finding? What format is it? How do you use it? How do you find it based on the format? And what are you going to do with it? This is a really good conversation because you can really talk to them how information is delivered and how it's often controlled and filtered by a lot of different things that they're not aware of. Even the platform that they're using. Are you on a mobile device? How is that impacting what you're seeing? Are you searching Google? Are you using a different kind of search engine? How are you finding information? Are you on a desktop? Are you on a laptop? And how access really impacts what you're finding and how you're using it. So it's a really interesting discussion for them. So does it work? At the bottom of our evaluation worksheet, we have a section that if they want to ask a follow-up question that they were embarrassed perhaps to ask during class, they don't want to seem ignorant in front of their classmates, other reasons they may not want to ask it in front of the class, we have a space for a question and their email address if you want follow-up questions from a librarian. Fall of 2012, 22% of the students asked follow-up questions. Fall of 2013, 6% of the students asked follow-up questions. Doing the same exact kind of material, we were instructing Credo, Academic Search Complete, and the library catalog. Doing this lesson, the number of follow-up questions decreased significantly. And I'm saying these are exactly comparable data in the sense that the same material was taught and the same instruction librarian. So it was all my instruction. I didn't include my colleagues so that it was exactly comparable. Because if you're going to use analogies, it's not always going to be exactly the same, or it's not going to resonate the same with students. So to make it comparable, it really had to be the same instructor. So only 6% in fall of 2013. And here's what the faculty had to say about it. This is my favorite quote, so I put it up there in left. Tremendous freedom and power. Okay. So when I was doing this lesson with them, in fact, this was a faculty member who experienced the very first time I did this, so I wasn't even as good at it as later on. But she was so thrilled because she felt the students came out of it. She has very high standards. Really feeling that they could master a lot more of this information than they could in the past. That another one was a faculty member, more results and better. So they're finding better results because they're more equipped to recognize what they're seeing, better ability to do their research independently, and what we teach them about web analysis is invaluable. That's another one of my favorite comments. These are all unsolicited comments, by the way. We didn't send them faculty follow-up forms or ask for their feedback. This is just what they sent me afterwards in an unsolicited way. These are just comments I received. Because I think for the students, like you could almost see the light bulbs go off as I was teaching these lessons. And as we're going through, it's getting, I think, better and better. Okay, so spring 2014, discovery works even better. If you have a library discovery system, instead of doing academic search complete or anything, use the discovery system in this method. This represents one question. So what happens is, the way our first year instruction program works, most of the students get their first year library instruction in the fall semester, but there are still some who actually don't get it till spring. And in this case, 25% of our students got their first year library instruction in the spring. Now granted, they probably had a little bit more comfort level with doing classwork and everything because they had that one semester behind them before spring instruction. But in spring 2014, there was only one question that came up, and it was really interesting to me because it actually pointed out a weakness in my own approach. And that is because this was an international student who clearly didn't share a framework with the rest of our students. So we have these traditional first-year students mostly that we deal with. We can kind of count on that Project Information Literacy's data is really going to be pretty accurate for our student population of what they do know, what their information-seeking behaviors are coming out of high school. But international students have an entirely different framework and an entirely different set of prior knowledge that they might be working with. So how do we address that? This is going to be a very big challenge going forward, I think, because we have more and more, at my institution, we have more and more international students. English is a second language. They have very different ideas about ethics of information use because they don't have the same idea of plagiarism, it's just really outside of their framework. They have very, very different relationship to the library, to library information. They may not have ever even been in a library before. Or the library they were in had closed stacks and the librarians were really mean. They're like, hey, come talk to us. So this is something that I will definitely be pursuing further and working on. How do we now also activate prior knowledge for international students or any other student who may not have this similar framework? And the institution I worked at before Simmons had a very different student population. And it was much more mixed in terms of mixed ability, mixed high school levels of privilege that the students come in with. Our Simmons students are mostly fairly privileged. So it's really something to consider when you're building a lesson based on prior knowledge. Is there any way to get a sense for what they know? Is there any consensus before they come in? Yeah, I don't know about you, but sometimes it's really hard to get faculty to agree to a pretest. Oh, can I give your students a pretest before they come in to see what they know? Very hard to get that stuff done sometimes. So this is really something that I think I'm going to have on my radar screen a little bit more going forward. I know it's a lesson now that works for traditional undergrads, but it may not be a lesson that works as well for non-traditional undergrads of all kinds. So, right about the faculty. Faculty were really positive about this. I don't think I had one faculty member that I worked with that didn't send me an unsolicited positive comment. Faculty were really positive. What about the librarians? So, I don't know how it is at your institution, but at ours, you have a wide differential in librarians. And I'm not just talking about generational, but you do have very big generational splits. I'm just also talking about working style and what they're comfortable with and how they instruct. So how do you get all the librarians on the same page with something like this? Well, one of the morning breakout session I went to, the presenters were really interesting on this topic. And they were talking about working with faculty and collaborating, but they were also talking about meta-literacy skills. How do librarians get at meta-literacy if we're not meta-literate ourselves? How do we do that, right? So I think, and working and talking to a lot of instruction librarians over the past year or so is this idea of how much do we have to learn? How can we keep up with this? How do I know these things? So that's a challenge and a hurdle. So if you're working with many instruction librarians in one institution, how do you get everyone at the same point where they're entirely comfortable working with digital objects, etc.? We have LibGuides at our library. Most of you probably have something similar, LibGuides, or work with wikis, some kind of research guides. And even the use of learning objects in those kind of formats gives you an idea of how comfortable people are contributing information, manipulating it, and working with it. And I think, I was talking to one of my fellow librarians, and she asked me, well, when do you think you'll know it's time to retire? And I said, I think I'll know it's time to retire when I can't learn anything more. I just can't change again, and I can't learn anything again. Because every other day, it seems like we have to change something. I have to learn something new. And I think that's the state of our profession, and I think that as soon as I get to the point where I just can't do it, that's when I'm going to hang back. Because this is what we have going on. So I think I've actually got lots of time for questions. I think I really ran through this very quickly. I felt like you got overwhelmed with theory this morning, and I didn't want to go into so much of the learning theory behind a lot of what I was doing here. So I kind of glossed over, but I would love to have a conversation about that. Yes.
Just a really practical question.
Yeah.
How long are your class sessions?
Well,
this
this
is like you're going through an awful lot of information with these kids.
We are lucky. We have 80 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have 80 minutes. So the typical first-year instruction at Simmons is 80-minute class. So they're all scheduled from 11 a.m. to 12:20. But the problem with that is they're all right before lunch, too. So sometimes you could tell they get a little impatient. But they're all 11 to 12:20, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. So we get one, but we do get 80 minutes.
80 minutes straight talking.
We can do the faculty members will give us the whole class time. They'll say, oh, do you want the whole class time? And well, yes, we do.
Now that you have a discovery tool, do you still teach the catalog separately, or do you talk
Well,
about books and articles?
really, really good question. We haven't quite worked that out yet. This spring, we strictly did the discovery tool. We didn't add the catalog piece into it. Partly because we're doing some research and some evaluation and assessment on the discovery tool. And I hate to use our students as guinea pigs in this research, but we kind of are, to see how they reacted to that. Because what we wanted them to do, and this is why we did it this way. In fact, I should probably talk a little bit more about this. What we wanted to do in that case is make it so much more directly comparable to what they're finding when they're searching something like Google. So when you're searching the library discovery tool, you're finding things in multiple formats, all produced for lots of different reasons by different people who had different purposes in mind. You're locating them in lots of different places too. Some could be physical items here in the library, some could be ebooks, some could be a streaming media file, some could be an article in a database, some could be an article that we're linking out to in a free open access journal. Some could be an article that we're linking out to in a separate freestanding journal platform. So the reason we did it that way is because now we have a much more comparable set of experiences for that. So you're looking at discovery and yes, it's a subset of information. It's the library subset that we've collected for you, but it's still cutting across all of these multiple areas, multiple formats, multiple purposes, multiple authors. And you're doing the same thing. So how do you narrow it down? How do you work with it? How do you understand and evaluate the information that you're finding in all of these different places? And I think it really helps them connect it even better because it is much more comparable than just one database that's mostly scholarly journal articles.
Is there a follow-up assignment that requires a similar research approach? Because I know with our students, if they come in, they see it as, oh, this is what we had to do in the library. Do they have a carryover where it's beneficial
They have
for the class?
Right, the assignment that they have is directly tied. It's a paper usually. It's not a research paper, it's a researched paper. I don't know, this is how the faculty describe it. They do have to find external sources for that, and it could be in lots of different places. And the different thing about our first year studies, what they do is they make them these like communities of interest. So a first year writing class might be strictly focused on literature, on literary topics. Or a first year writing class might be a really heavy social science focus. Or this year I had an eco-criticism. The whole first year writing course was on eco-criticism. And they were drawing from environmental science and literary criticism and putting the two together. So they all have this follow-up assignment, and most of the faculty are really good about talking about the sources their students are finding after it. They don't always share it exactly, but they will follow up and did they find better sources, what is it they're looking at, etc. So most of them will voluntarily follow up with us at the completion of that assignment. But unfortunately, I would love to just get copies of it, but they don't give them to us.
When you do the, when you use the discovery tool, which we just acquired that in our library,
Yeah.
how does it change your scaffolding approach to this lesson?
Slightly. We spend a lot more time on developing search terms before we do anything else. So a lot more time on that background piece, on how you come up with, because the more you refine your search, and this serves them well in any information environment, the more refined they are and the more they think about what it is they're trying to find and what they need it for, the better their results are going to be going in. So we spend more time up front with defining those terms. Yeah, but that's the only real difference.
I found that the faculty at my school are 90% interested in getting the students to cite information properly
Yes.
and don't make the connection that if they find better information, they'll get better papers.
Right.
So I feel like when I'm instructing, I'm focusing so much on that. And can you help me find a way to incorporate?
Focusing so much on citation?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You know, our faculty, it's interesting. I just had a conversation last week with a faculty member, and I'm an Arts and Humanities librarian, so I work with all the faculty in Arts and Humanities. And I was having a conversation with a faculty in art who's having me in this fall for the first time to her class. And I've been there 3 years, and she's finally like, okay, beyond the first year writing piece, I need this for Art 100, this basic intro course for art. And we had this conversation because I think you're right, they are confusing sometimes the quality of the citation with the quality of the information they're finding. That you really should be looking at the quality of the information that they're finding rather than, oh, can they cite something properly? And she says she's just been frustrated with the quality of information that they're finding, and they're finally getting to this point. But I don't know how, aside from that one-on-one outreach and discussion, you know, there's no one-size-fits-all for faculty. And one of the morning presenters in the breakout I went to was really good on this topic, because some faculty are going to be much more on board than others, much more aware of all of these issues and how they impact their own work, than other faculty thinking, oh no, the library doesn't have really anything to contribute to this conversation. So it's been the result of a lot of outreach, and partially I think in her case, she's open to it because I'm doing a co-teaching with one of her colleagues this fall, where we co-develop the syllabus, the assignments, and have the beyond embedding kind of. So I think now she's saying, well, if the chair of the department's going to co-teach a course with you, maybe it's worthwhile talking to you about this. Yeah. So it's a real trial and error with faculty. Wish I had a better answer.
Along those lines, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more to some of the deep analogies or
Yes.
techniques you use for talking about scholarly sources, because I found, I work in a library, but I also teach as an adjunct, and I found that my students, as much as I, as a librarian, was talking about scholarly sources, they were still giving me bbc.com.
Yes, yes. Oh, really good question. I'm glad you asked that question. I should have actually touched on that a little bit more, so I'm really glad you asked that. Because that is a real hurdle, I think, for undergraduate students to understand the difference between a magazine article. And even when you tell them specifically, you can't go to Time magazine, or you cannot give me a newspaper article, they still confuse that because the newspaper article cited a study. So what I'll oftentimes do is pull up a magazine article or something like that that cites a study, and I say, here's the actual study that the information came from, okay? And this is the difference in it. And when I talk about the scholarly conversation in the sense that it's scholars talking to other scholars. They're not writing it for us, they're writing it for other people in their field, and they're writing it in a vocabulary that they assume their audience understands. And it's got an entirely different kind of language. And so I give the analogies, I do it going back to where would you find this, what would you be looking at, and what is the actual thing in this article. And it's really helpful if you have one up that's relevant to them, that you can point out where there's a small article that cites a scholarly study and then show them the difference with an actual scholarly study.
Another thing is if you're trying to do that in a course, like this wouldn't work so well in a one shot. But when I took intro psych in undergrad, my professor actually gave us a newspaper article where it summarized the study. We had to go find the study and then compare the two.
Right, and that's a great assignment that I've seen faculty give that help students understand the difference between those. But oftentimes we don't have that kind of assignment for a one-shot first year.
It wouldn't work.
But you can do that side-by-side comparison though, of something that actually cites a study versus the actual study itself, and what the differences are, and how that study is adding to the conversation that the popular media is then amplifying in certain ways. And we also talk about how the popular media might have spun it or given it a particular kind of bias based on how it was being presented. So there's lots of different ways you can do that. And again, we try to be really responsive to what the students are participating. One of the things that this does is the students participate a lot. And they are teaching each other through this section because they're talking about what they're finding. I have them each talk about what they found on Google. And the other interesting thing they get in the Google reflecting part is some of them, right, will get the exact same scholarly article that they got in a database. That's a great teaching moment for them because we tell them Google personalization. It knows where you are. It knows where you're sitting. It knows what you're searching for. It's trying to replicate the kind of things you're clicking on and searching for. And so it's going to push these articles up to the top if it knows that's what you've been doing. So it gives you a great opportunity to talk about how Google skews its results based on your personal IP address, and how it personalizes them and how it changes what you're looking at based on what computer you're on. So it gives you a lot of opportunities to talk about how that conversation is working and how all those information objects are jostling around in the web the way that they are, and kind of having a conversation with each other as well. So, more questions? I think I was really fast. I'm sorry if I was too fast. No? Yeah.
This all sounds great if you have 80 minutes or whatever number of minutes you have.
Right.
Now, can you do a mini lesson in 25 minutes? And
Well,
what would you, how would you?
Yeah, I've thought about that. You know, how would I put this kind of a lesson when I get a very short time? How would I do something similar? And I may, cut some of the steps out of it because I wouldn't have enough time to do it. I would probably, again, really focus them on developing their ideas and their search terms, and then doing just side-by-side comparisons and leave out some of the other steps, because I think the most important thing for them is to understand and evaluate that information, understand what the formats are, understand who's writing it for what purpose, how it's being filtered, and how you're getting it, because it's all being filtered, whether it's in a library product or whether it's on the web. It's all being filtered in one way or another. So how do those modes of access filter what you're finding? And how do you get around that by being a more sophisticated consumer of information and user of information? And how you can reuse that. So I would probably cut that part out.
Thank you.
One of my colleagues developed a really good activity it was actually an opening activity for a class that was 75 minutes long. But I ended up thinking that it was so good that I would stretch it out and make it longer because the students are really responding to it. But it basically, we broke them into 4 groups, and we asked each group to choose a different search tool. So we had Google, we had a subject-specific database, we had a discovery tool, and our classic catalog. And so they were all searching for the same topic within each one. And then
it was originally planned to have the students just come back and discuss,
Mhm.
you know, what they found and everything, but I was having them go up to the projector as a group and actually show, like go through the process so that they could show the other students, and then, you know, explain, you know, it turned out really great with like Google, for example, because like when they pulled up a site, I'd be like, so who wrote this?
Right.
And they'd be like, Diane?
Yeah. Right,
So-
that's a great example, and one of my co-librarians, one of my colleagues, does something where she does have the students come and demonstrate it in front of the class. I found that I'm not very good at doing that myself, like running team activities, and it's probably because I personally was never good at doing that as a student. And you find out this stuff too. I mean, it really does inform my own practice, trying to be sort of metacognitive about my own practice and my own biases as an instructor, because I'm biased toward the kind of student I was, as opposed to all the different students in the classroom. And I think one of the things that I'm finding as I reflect back on this year of experimentation with this particular method is I really do need to reflect back on different learning styles and how those students might be coming at it differently. And I think that's a great exercise to work with so that they can compare and contrast like that. And I like the students doing it themselves too and showing the other students how to do it. I think they like to learn from each other.
I just, seeing as we have time, I want to comment on the activity. I like that a lot. And one of the things that's interesting about that, because one of the problems that I've had sort of playing with the idea of the discovery tool is that it is too much like Google. We have a large LV population in our school, and sometimes that amount of results can just be overwhelming for students. And so to have students comparing everything that they find and all the different formats that they find using the discovery tool to then what they would find, say, using a subject-specific database or looking in the library catalog, I think would be, you know, really an interesting conversation to develop.
It is, you know, and that was how that's how our fall was structured. So everything they find versus academic search complete, for instance,
Right.
or versus the library catalog. What are you finding there? But I do actually find it really useful to use Discovery, because when they leave the library, they're not going to have any of our tools usually anymore, and they're going to be going onto the web.
Yeah.
And I really do want them to be able to transfer what I'm teaching them into that web environment in a complex, overwhelming web environment.
That's a really good point.
So that's one of the reasons I do it that way, because you know it's fun to think about all these subsets, and they love it once they learn a tool. Project information literacy research is showing that you teach them academic search complete, they will use that for the rest of their 4 years in college. They will do it. They may not explore any other, you know, thing, but if they learn how to use that and do use it, that's the one thing they'll use. But I think with Discovery, we're giving them this whole other way of looking at it, that it's organized much more like the outside world, kind of. So that's why I'm very enthused about the Discovery results. But we're doing a lot more assessment on that. We've had it now since January, so it's new. And we're in the process of doing evaluation and assessment on its effectiveness. We're not sure yet. We haven't even done usability testing yet, so we'll find out on the way we've set it up.
Right.
Because we make assumptions, as all librarians do, we make assumptions about what our population is, what they need, what they want, how they use it, and then you find out. We did usability testing on our LibGuides, on our research guides, and we were really surprised to find out certain things about them, and we redesigned them based on our usability testing. And we're just fortunate because we have a graduate school of library science that has a usability lab, so you can get time in the lab. But it's very informative when you see how people actually use things versus how we think they ought to use them. And one of my hopes is that this is transferable regardless of how they use information. They can at least know what it is they're looking at and where it fits into that universe of information and why. The why is always the part I'm most interested in and the part I like to get at with them rather than necessarily the how. Any more questions or comments? This is a great discussion, so I'm enjoying your comments.
Well, I want to go back to you when you said you divided up the class in 4 groups. Are you lucky enough to have the rooms set up so they all can gather around computers, or are they in a row, or?
Yeah, we have a classroom that has a lot of computers, so they can actually each within their group do the search and then just talk about it as a
Okay.
group. But I you know, if you know, you had like even 4 students in the classroom who came in with laptops, then you could just have each group, you know, go around with one laptop.
I was gonna add, you can always have them do it on their phones. Seriously, when you don't have computers.
Yeah. You can have them search any device. I let them search whatever device they bring into the room with them, whatever they're comfortable searching, but I do make them do the handwritten parts, because I think that's the part where they're getting that learning and that hand to brain connection is being made. So no matter what device they're using to search, whether it's a mobile device, one of the classroom computers, a laptop, I do want them to do the exercises using their hands. And, you know, I actually meant to mention this at the beginning. I've gone through lots of iterations on exercises on how to get them engaged. And I've used Poll Everywhere, and I've used shared Google Docs, and lots of different ways of doing it. But I find that as much as they enjoy it when they're in the class, it doesn't stick. And my goal with this is to try and get something that seems to stick a little bit better. That they actually seem to come away with something they're applying later on when they're writing their papers.
This is just a quick one. I know you said you're doing assessment on the discovery, but
Yeah.
the assessment that you do for your 80-minute class,
Mhm.
they probably keep their index cards?
Yes, they do.
So do you get anything?
We get the evaluation worksheet where they reflect back.
Oh,
So,
okay.
you know,
So that's a worksheet.
and that's a worksheet, and the most important part of it is not the citation they give me for a journal article, it's their reflection. I only ask them for a citation because I think that gives them an object to focus on, but then I want them to reflect, and I think the most important part of it for transferring that knowledge is having them reflect on the process and deciding which tool they would choose if they were given a particular assignment. Why would you choose one or the other? Reflect back on it. And what are you going to find if you make that choice? So we give them a spot for reflection and prompts for the things they ought to be thinking about to write up their response.
Do you get an opportunity to give them feedback on that evaluation form?
No, unfortunately we don't. We don't. You know, as much as I would like to. I've been in a situation before in my prior institution where we got to give them worksheets and give them feedback, and they got to revise searches and come back to us for more, but in this case, no, we don't. We get them once. Or more than once. It's very haphazard, like many institutions. All the first-year students get library instruction, and then it's just scattered throughout the rest of the institution. So some students are going to get library instruction 3 or 4 times during their undergraduate years, and some are going to get it once, only once, when they're first years, depending on the faculty.
Have you thought about a way to take this approach and make it more subject, like discipline specific? Because I mean, what you presented is really, very
For first year.
introductory,
Yes.
first year kind of thing.
Yes, like I said, our first year program, I'm trying to make this broad so it's more applicable, but our first year program is divided up into communities of interest. So I did this very much in literature because I'm an arts and humanities person. So I did a lot of instruction in literary criticism using this approach, which was a really interesting exercise. But that again, that was developing more of their terminology before they even go into any of the searching. But yeah, it adapts really well for subject specific as long as you're really focused and you know what topic they're working on. You really do have to understand. In that case, you definitely need their assignment and their topic so that you can really focus what they're looking for and how they learn.
Thank you.
Thank you.